The entire school corridor had frozen in stunned silence, like someone had suddenly pressed pause on reality. Teachers stood shocked, students whispered in disbelief, and even the security guards were unsure whether to intervene. The billionaire's twin daughters were screaming, kicking, throwing books, and melting into a full-blown tantrum in the middle of the floor. A therapist had just walked out of their classroom, shaking his head as if he'd just escaped a battlefield. And then, cutting through the chaos like a quiet miracle, a janitor wearing a faded uniform and old sneakers calmly walked toward them with a mop in one hand and a trash bag in the other. His name was Daniel Hayes, a single father who once worked in the military and now cleaned hallways nobody appreciated. And without saying a word, without raising his voice, he did what no one else had been able to do. The girls stopped screaming. Before we go deeper, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power hidden in ordinary people. The billionaire's twin daughters, Emma and Elise Montclair, had earned a reputation so intense that even the most experienced educators avoided their school wing. They broke rules with no remorse, destroyed property, screamed at everyone, and seemed to live in a constant storm of anger. Their father, Alexander Montclair, one of the richest private investors on the East Coast, had tried everything. Child psychologists, elite tutors, special therapists, exclusive boarding programs. Nothing worked. The twins scared teachers. They frightened substitutes. They made nannies quit by lunchtime. Nobody could reach them. Nobody could calm them. They were called untamable, spoiled monsters, and every adult who met them saw only two angry children with too much money, too many problems, and zero discipline. But Daniel saw something else that day in that hallway. As the twins' fury echoed off lockers and the crowd watched like an audience waiting for disaster, he didn't see brats. He saw fear hiding under noise. He saw kids who knew how to scream louder than their pain. He'd seen that before, not in rich schools or polished hallways, but in his own son years ago. His boy, Taylor, had cried and yelled when his mother died, when grief crushed him at an age too young to understand loss. Daniel remembered the only thing that worked with his son wasn't force, wasn't control, but understanding. A calm presence, a steady voice, a heart that stayed when everything felt like it was falling apart. So, instead of rushing toward the chaos, he did something unexpected. He sat down on the floor near the twins and began quietly cleaning up the spilled paint one of them had thrown. He didn't look at them. He didn't react to the noise. He just mopped the mess like it was the only task that mattered. Slowly, curiously, the twins' shrieks began to soften as they watched him. They were used to adults shouting, threatening consequences, rushing in panic. But this man was ignoring their storm. And something in that silence challenged them more deeply than anger ever could. Emma stomped her foot, waiting for him to react. Elise threw a pencil his way, but he only picked it up and put it gently into his trash bag. Their tantrum started losing energy, like a fire with no oxygen. Finally, Emma asked loudly why he wasn't scared of them. That's when he looked up. Not angry, not superior, just steady, and continued working. He wasn't afraid of kids. He had survived war. He had survived losing his wife. He had survived raising a child alone on a janitor's salary. He respected them, but he wasn't intimidated, and that difference confused them. The school administration noticed the miracle. They asked Daniel what he did to calm them. He said he just treated them like children, not problems. The principal, desperate and exhausted, asked Daniel to stay after school and spend time with the twins. He refused the first 2 times, knowing he needed to work extra shifts to support his son. But the 3rd time he saw something in the principal's eyes, helplessness. And he remembered how the world walked away from him when he struggled to raise a grieving child. So, he agreed. That's how a janitor began teaching 2 billionaire girls without ever using a chalkboard. The first day, he didn't lecture them, he didn't scold them. He took them outside to help him sweep leaves. They complained, kicked at piles, and demanded to go inside, but he stayed calm, letting them get tired of fighting the task. Eventually, they helped without realizing they had chosen to. The act of working side by side created a quiet bond. They began following his rhythm, not because they were forced, but because they felt something unfamiliar and comforting. Someone who stayed. After a week, the girls weren't yelling as much. After 2 weeks, they began looking for him before school started. After 3 weeks, they began waiting with small lunches. They asked the cafeteria lady to pack just for him. They started asking questions about brooms, mops, paint spills, and tools. They weren't seeking chaos. They were seeking attention in the only ways they knew. Chaos was the language of children who were never heard. One afternoon, Alexander Montclair finally showed up in person. He had been traveling on business, delegating his daughter's struggles to professionals. Seeing Daniel, a janitor, teaching his children to wipe desks and organize cleaning supplies, offended him at first. He called it degrading, unnecessary, beneath his daughters. He demanded it stop immediately. But the twins ran in front of Daniel, standing like small shields, insisting that he was their friend, that he was the only one who understood them. The billionaire froze. No therapist had ever earned that loyalty. No instructor had ever heard a respectful plea from them. For the first time, they sounded like children who cared about someone. Alexander was torn. Pride battled truth inside him. But Daniel explained gently, without defiance, that the girls weren't out of control. They were lonely. They weren't angry. They were scared. They didn't need control. They needed stability. Someone consistent. Someone who didn't vanish when things got hard. Work gave them structure. Respect gave them peace. And routine helped them feel safe. A father who had built empires suddenly realized he had never built a connection with his own daughters. So he asked Daniel for help. Daniel hesitated. He could barely provide for his son with the cleaning job. He didn't want to be used. But Alexander offered something unexpected, not money, not position. He asked to be taught to connect with his children. The billionaire humbled himself in front of a janitor, showing the kind of vulnerability powerful men rarely admit to. So, Daniel began teaching Alexander in small steps. Not therapy, not lectures, just presence. He showed him how to listen without interrupting, how to sit with them even when they were upset, how to let them help him fix a small broken toy instead of buying a brand new one. Slowly, the girls began to trust their father the same way they trusted Daniel. As their behavior changed, the entire school saw it. Teachers stopped flinching at their names. Other students began approaching them without fear. For the first time in years, they were included in group activities, not because they were rich, but because they were finally kind. Months passed. Daniel was still a janitor, and he didn't mind. His son, Taylor, saw how the girls improved, and he admired his father deeply. One evening, Alexander invited Daniel and his son for dinner at his mansion. Daniel almost refused, uncomfortable with lavish displays of wealth. But his son begged to see what the inside of a billionaire's home looked like, so he reluctantly agreed. The mansion was filled with polished marble floors, chandeliers, expensive art, and silence so heavy it seemed sad. The twins were overjoyed to see them, dragging Daniel and his son upstairs to show drawings they made of the three of them sweeping leaves together. Alexander watched quietly, his eyes watery. He had spent a lifetime collecting things people admired, and ended up missing the only treasure that mattered, connection with his children at the end of dinner. Alexander gave Daniel something unexpected, not a bag of money, not a car, not an award. He offered him a position overseeing a new community program for troubled children, funded entirely by him. It came with a proper salary, benefits for his son, and a chance to use his gift to change more lives. Daniel accepted, not because of the money, but because he saw children everywhere who needed someone steady, someone patient, someone who didn't walk away. Before the ending, if this story touched your heart even a little, please like, share, comment, and subscribe so more people can discover stories of compassion, hope, and second chances. Years later, the Montclair twins became advocates for children coping with emotional struggles. Daniel became a mentor admired by parents, teachers, and community leaders. And Alexander became a present father, reshaping his entire life around what mattered most. Not one person forgot how it all began. With a single dad janitor, a quiet mop, and 2 girls who just needed someone to stay. Special request, comment below. Do you believe that kindness from ordinary people can change lives in extraordinary ways? Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please support it with your likes, comments, and shares, and subscribe to the channel to help spread more emotional and inspiring stories.